So, without further ado, we're going to start chapter 9 of Tanya, since we took a little bit time in delving through the high holidays. And for those of you, I hear children in the background. I love hearing children, but if you could just make sure that you put it on mute. All right, so I'm just going to review what we spoke a little bit the last time we were studying Tanya. Basically, the chapters before, we were studying about the garments of the soul and the 10 holy soul powers. And then we were discussing the animal soul and its 10 powers and its garments that originate in the Klippa. And now in this chapter, we're going to actually discuss the battle fought within the Jew between these two powers. It's really amazing. I was once somewhere and I met this woman, non-Chabad, and, no idea about Tanya. And she was just so confused why sometimes she seems to handle herself and sometimes it's so difficult for her. And when I was talking about this idea of the animal soul and the godly soul, and our whole mission is to be able to, really transform this animal soul, she was just it relieved her. So I pray that as we continue learning Tanya, that this relieves us of the stress of trying to understand ourselves, and it just makes all the difference in the world. When you better understand yourself, you have a better idea of how to overcome what you're struggling with. So the Alter Rebbe actually says that the animal soul is in the heart, and this heart, as you know, is predominant, whereas the left side of the heart is with the blood, and all parts of the body has blood, but the left side is the most filled body part with the most blood. So the Alter Rebbe says that the left side of the heart is where the animal soul is. Now, that is why we actually lust for things, and that's why boasting and all the negative emotions like anger and all the passions of the heart actually stem from this point. And here, the Alter Rebbe explains that from the heart, just like blood from the heart spreads all over the body, that the animal soul and its passions and its desire begins at the heart and then spreads all over our body, so that we have this lust for, sweets, or we tend to, let's say, get maybe angry, and then the emotion that starts in the heart then actually begins to permeate our body, so that we speak with a louder voice. Our eyes begin to look more dull and stern or strict, and our cheeks might even start to get red. And so the way the blood gets channeled into all parts of the body, our emotions then get channeled into all parts of our body. And when he talks about this, he says, and from the heart they spread throughout the entire body, rising also to the brain in the head. Because once you have a type of emotion, then it'll rise to your brain, and then you'll start thinking about, now, wow, that really bothered me. I'm going to tell that person off. And then the person starts thinking of how to, in a split second, deal with it. So the same thing with these emotions. And it's interesting, the Alter Rebbe notes that it says first it spreads throughout the entire body and then it rises. And in the footnote, he says, let's understand these two distinctions. Why did he mention spread throughout the entire body and then rising? So he says emotions merely spread to all the other organs. But when it comes to the brain, it actually then says it rises to the brain. Because what happens is when emotions are assimilated into the intellect, it actually ends up being elevated. So that way, when if we really use the power of the brain, and this emotion is kind of rising up to the brain, and we combat it with our intellect, oh no, that's not the best way to behave. It's like I'm really going to look bad, or I'm not going to be a good role model to my parents. Then the actual emotion is rising up and then becomes elevated. Once it does raise itself to the brain. But if we don't use the brain, it just kind of gets to the brain and we let the animal soul like dictate and overcome us, then it ends up being spread up all over the body, and we behave in a way that's not elevated and actually in a way that might be degrading. So it's interesting. Rabbi Tzvi Friedman explains how in the body the different organs are working inside, even though we have no sense. In a sense, we don't actually see it like we see our hand. It's going up and down. It's working. We don't sense what's going on inside. And the same is true when we understand ourselves. There is a battle going on here, and it's happening. And the more we're aware of the battle, and the more we're aware that we have to fight this battle, then we'll be able to have more control. And he was actually just giving an idea of an example of the type of kindness that is done in the world, is also a form of mystery to us, because even though we don't see its effect maybe immediately, but it's affecting the higher spheres. So the same thing, it's like we know there's a battle going on, and we're sensing that we might be controlling it, and by us controlling it, we have no clue really of its workings in the higher spheres and how it brings the chesed and uniting with the gevura to bring sweetening of all the gevura decrees up in Shemayim, bringing more benevolence here down on this earth. So the Alter Rebbe then continues and he says that the nefesh, the soul, is also pervading in all parts of our body, and we're not even maybe cognizant of it. Then he continues and he says that the abode of the divine soul is in the brains, specifically in the head. And from there, it extends to all parts of the body. And the divine soul is essentially intellective. And that is where all the seeds of intellectual understandings. He also says that the divine soul also resides in the heart, but in the right part of the heart, where scientifically we study there is not so much blood in comparison to the left. As you know, all the blood going into the brain actually gets more refined as it actually reaches the brain, and is the most pure and healthy and emotion, that will come from the purification of this, physiological, blood going into head, the same way as our emotion comes to our head, and if we have the capacity to, overcome it through the powers of the divine intellect, then it too will become purified. And the animal soul will lose its negative energy. It'll peel away all the negative attributes of this animal soul. And eventually the goodness of this animal soul will come shining forth. It's interesting. I was just at some seminar recently, and the teacher was talking about instances where health is affected by the emotions, of course. And what could typically happen is the more someone tries to control the negative emotion, even though they might be really handling the emotion and not letting it to be expressed, the tension and holding it down can actually permeate the body, the stress of managing that emotion, that it actually can lead to, let's say, an ulcer or a headache, backache, or whatever it is. And the point of this whole seminar was really to, for me, that one concept of not necessarily working at controlling your negative emotion, but really working on controlling the way you think about the situation so that the negative emotion won't come up in the first place, so that you won't work so hard to keep it, in order, or trapped in this, this area of the spiritual space called, the heart, where the animal soul is, because that is a big strain on the body. So the more you work at focusing on preventing even from the beginning for the emotion to come, and how is that done? By really understanding with your mind that everything you're going through is really for your benefit, and everything you're experiencing is meant to happen and from God. So get over it and don't get so uptight. They're actually happening. See it as a moment of opportunity to grow, to elevate yourself, to show Hashem how much you are besimcha with what's going on in your life, so that you won't be constantly, battling that emotion and controlling it. Kind of like the idea of the story where Athrabi, in the later part in Tanya, says, if you mess around with a dirty person, you're going to end up getting very dirty. No matter how much you try, if a person fell in the mud and you start, try to engage him in any way, that eventually you'll get kind of dirty. So the same thing regarding the emotions. Delving too deeply into why this and why that, and maybe because it's my childhood, and maybe, it's the way I got the chinuch, and you start going so into the negative that you end up really getting messed up in a way. There was a cute story about the Rebbe in a book called Doesn't Anyone Blush Anymore by Manis Friedman. He was talking about this woman who just was, Baruch Hashem, honest with herself and realized she really wasn't a nice person. She was quick to anger, she was, self-centered, and she ended up letting her emotion just overcome her. And she went to the Rebbe, asking for a bracha, please help me. I don't know how to overcome all these negative attributes. So that, he didn't prescribe psychoanalytical therapy to look into your past. He simply gave her a hora'ah. And what did he tell her? An instruction. Just start being nice. when people ask you for something, just pass them the salt. Just go and extend yourself further to be nice to the person. And by practicing and serving people and being giving to people, even though you don't feel like it, that you'll be nice. And you'll see that eventually it'll just become second nature, and you'll be amazed at the results. And such a simple instruction. Just force yourself, in a sense, to serve and give and do, and then you'll be nice. It'll happen for you. Where the opposite, if you get too into it and spend fortunes of money going to this and that and here, workshops and healers and this and that and psychoanalytical, and you're still not only not better, but like you're more, have invested the energy to yourself, which ends up not really benefiting you and making you a bit more dirty and not healed and not moving forward. So, as we continue, the Alter Rebbe says that the heart of a wise man, which is from the pasuk in Koheles, that the heart of the wise man is someone who really works at transforming this heart into a positive being. As we learn, it's difficult because the Yetzer Hara is considered the old fool. It comes into our life first and foremost. And only when we're bar and bar mitzvahs does the Yetzer HaTov and the power of the neshama, even begins to be part of our life. So we have a history of, being persuaded that much more easily by this Yetzer Hara. But it is not far from us to be able to really begin in this transformation. And in this chapter, the Alter Rebbe actually gives us the direction how to do it. And because we're learning that the Nefesh HaBehemis is on the left side, and the Nefesh HaElokis is on the right side also. And that's the type of emotion of love of Hashem and Yirat Hashem. So how you access this revelation of this heart of the divine soul that's in the right side, how do you make it come to you? How do you get this fiery love towards God, to be manifest in your life? The type that just flares up in the heart. And the Alter Rebbe says it's through using the power of Chokhmah. And by using Bina, by understanding. And by using the knowledge in the brain to be able to get to that level of Das, knowledge. And how can we develop Chokhmah, Bina, and Das? The Alter Rebbe actually says that when you begin to really use your brain to understand the greatness of God, this will lead one to love Him. And this is the first step of the brain, bringing the information into the heart, so then the heart will actually, feel these positive emotions. Secondly, he says that when you also use the brain to contemplate on the beauty of God and the majesty of His glory, because then the heart will develop gladness at understanding the ways of Hashem. And that's why it says in Koheles, as Alter Rebbe brings out, the wise man's eyes which are in his head, meaning in the brain, because the brain is actually harboring Hashem's wisdom. And he's beginning to understand through this contemplation. And if you, read ahead in Volume 2 of Tanya, it talks about this same pasuk, that the wise man's eyes are in his head. And he actually says, this is kind of funny, like everybody's eyes are in their head. So if Kohelet is saying such a simple pasuk, there must be more to this. So not only is, the head representing all the intellect, the eyes are actually connected to the wisdom of God. And so this helps the person constantly be in touch with Hashem, and then the positive emotions begin to develop. He also says that the eyes in the head is hinting to us that the eyes have to be constantly aware that the Shekhinah wants to rest on one's head, and that the Shekhinah actually needs good deeds to be able to reside. So he's constantly keeping tap with his day-to-day routine. Am I doing enough? Am I running out of oil? The good deeds, so that the Shekhinah will come upon man. So in this way, the vision of the eyes is always on the ball of what needs to be done to be able to bring the Shekhinah and dwelling within him. So he continues, when the eyes, the intellectual faculties, gaze intently at the glory of Hashem and the beauty of his unfathomable, infinite, and boundless greatness, then the heart rejoices and is glad. And then he says the gazing with one's mind's eye means that one not only understands the greatness of Hashem, but also perceives it as though he's seeing it with his own very eyes. And that also takes a little bit training, to see really all the good in your life, to see every little thing as an amazing gift, instead of just looking at all the things that aren't going right. It's interesting because Manis Friedman in the Doesn't Anyone Blush Anymore, just to put a little input on that, it also is in regarding to marriage. Like he was saying how when you just focus on everything that's not right, he doesn't do this and he does this, none of that, you're bound to lose the love, and you're bound to just get annoyed and, God forbid, feel estranged. But the more you just focus on what is good in the relationship, and even though it's just little here and little there, and you live as if it's totally perfect, then the love will begin to develop. And he says one of the main reasons why it's so easy to just lose ourselves in just focusing on what is not perfect and not there that we want is that we've crossed the other person's border, meaning we so much want for ourselves certain things that we step into the other person's space, wanting them to be just so perfect. And really, it's not in our jurisdiction, as it were, to go into their space and expect them to be a specific type of person. They know deep down inside they have that to work on and that to work on, and the more we get annoyed and negatively react to all that's not perfect, the more we're not respecting their private space and their border of their, time span of development. I always say we don't expect a baby just born to run a marathon. So the same thing. We have to realize that just like it's difficult for us to change, and it's also difficult for the other person to change. And the more we respect those borders and not force ourselves in their own private space of development, the more we'll be able to appreciate what is good and pay attention to the gift that they have to offer us, and hopefully create a safe atmosphere to replenish the energies to the other so that they have the strength to then focus on, getting better and elevating themselves without being too demanding. So the same thing with God. The more we really see the good in our life and the good that He gives us, and we really just ignore that we don't have this and we want that, the more we'll tap into this positive, healthy, beautiful emotion of love of Hashem. Then he goes on and he explains that also the other holy emotions are in the heart too, such as fear of God. And this also originates from the Chabad faculties of Chokhmah, Bina, and Das. So the more we develop our wisdom, the more we'll have access to a healthy Yirat Hashem. And when dealing with all kinds of patients that have all kinds of phobias and fears and anxieties, I say to them, the more you study and the more your mind gets healed from this wisdom, then the more your fears will subside, because you're using this positive emotion of Yirat Hashem, so that there's no room for that same energy to be used for the fears and the phobias and so forth. So that the more you learn, the more, as it were, you're snatching away from this unhealthy pachad and turning it into a good yira. And the Alter Rebbe explains, because basically there's only one nation shall prevail over the other nation, as the verse referring to Yaakov and Esav in the Tanakh, where it says, when one was going to be, one can only be over the other. And the same thing is going on between the animal soul and the godly soul. As soon as the animal soul is fearful of and is phobic and has worries and all that other things, then the person won't be able to develop yira. But the more the person takes the time to study the wisdom of Hashem, then the godly soul will be king over this city, the city being the body, because only one king can prevail. And that's the divine soul's will and desire, that she alone will rule over the person and direct him, so that all the organs will be subject to her discipline. And so that the organs actually become a chariot for her. And also that the organs be a garment as an instrument of expression, so that the 10 faculties of the soul, the 7 emotional and the 3 garments of thought, speech, and action, will then be controlled by this godly soul. And she really wants that the entire body should be permeated by the divine soul alone, leaving no place for the faculties and garments of the animal soul, so that no alien would then pass through the organs, God forbid, meaning the animal soul, and that the animal soul won't have any influence over it. And he actually says that the 3 brains that we have, and remember this was written so many years back, that he's saying this, the 3 brains correspond to the 3 intellectual faculties of Chokhmah, Bina, and Das. And that through discerning God and understanding Him, and thus applying the faculties of Chokhmah, Bina, and Das, that the ability of applying these meditations on Hashem's greatness will actually allow the person to really better understand Hashem, but also begin to really feel it. And this will give birth to awe in his mind and dread of Hashem in his heart. And it's interesting, if you look at the way it's written, it first says awe in his mind, and then it says dread in the heart. And in previous chapters, I think it was chapter 3, that the Alter Rebbe actually explains the difference between yira and pachad. And then he now explains why is it here that he mentions yira first, and in the earlier chapter 3 that he mentions pachad first. Because in chapter 3 it was talking about emotions. Pachad is related to like a dread, which is felt emotionally in one's heart. Whereas yira is connected to awe, which is felt for the most part in the intellect. So the concept here is, like, if you look at the Hebrew language, pachad is connected to like emotion. Oh my gosh, you just witnessed something and you're like so scared. It's so like frightening. So like your heart beats and you're feeling this kind of scary feeling. It's a fear. Whereas yira is connected possibly to an intellectual experience of maybe thinking about the future. Wow, I wonder if I don't work and I just take off and just study the whole year, I won't be saving money in the bank, and who knows? And you start having this like type of intellectual fear. It's not like it's right there with you and you're like, overcome emotion. So the same thing here. When we delve into these meditations of the greatness of Hashem, we're going to be able to develop and give birth to not only the awe of Hashem in one's mind. Oh my gosh, we can delve into the intellect and look into the future of how it's going to be wonderful when, I have such awe when the future comes and Mashiach, it's just going to be amazing, and you just get more and more like awe of Hashem. And then there's a type of pachad, like an emotional sense of God. It's now, it's here. Oh my gosh, I don't want to do anything to separate myself from Hashem. I want to be very careful. And you have a more emotional experience of fearing God. Not because, God forbid, thinking about a punishment or anything, but really because you don't want to be separated from Hashem. And you realize that, God forbid, when you do a sin, at that moment there's even if it's an infinitesimal small moment in your life of, you don't want that separation. So then he continues and he explains that is why it talks about in this chapter of God, because you want that to develop first in your mind. Then, as you develop it in your mind, it will trickle down into your heart, and you'll actually feel an emotional experience of dread, of not wanting to be separated from Hashem. And through this, it would also develop love of Hashem, burning in the heart like a fiery flashes. He says his soul will thirst and pine with desire and longing to cleave to the blessed Ein Sof with all of his heart, his soul, and might. And here, the Alter Rebbe actually explains what is the difference between with all of your heart, with all of your soul, and might. With all of your heart means that the heart is filled with love of God. With all of your soul implies that the love then actually spills over beyond the heart, meaning to affect all the organs in the body and the soul. When you love someone, then you, as the Tzemach Tzedek said in his in one of the Igros that I read, that a type of a love of there's like 3 types of love. There's Ahavat Olam. You contemplate, you really love Hashem for all the goodness in the world, the amazing tasty fruits of all different kinds, the different roses and flowers, and oh my gosh, you just like, it's unbelievable. Through the world, you just come to love His majesty and His beauty. But then there's a type of love which is Ahava Rabbah, where it's like a romantic kind of love. Oh my gosh, I want to make him happy. It's amazing. I want to do this. I want to do that. And the emotion that is positive in you drives you to go do a mitzvah in a most beautiful way. So here, the whole point of this love is to be able to have it spill over into the organs of your body, to motivate it, to invigorate it, to more forcefully get involved in Hashem's Torah and mitzvahs, whether it's praying, learning, or giving tzedakah. Because then that will allow you to fulfill the mission of acquiring this love. To acquire this love for the sake of just feeling this love is not the point. No, it's nice. It's nice to feel, this tingling sensation and totally connected to God. But that's not the goal. The Alter Rebbe is teaching us the goal is to have it permeate to all our organs so that tachlis, bottom line, is we serve Hashem. As it stated in Volume 2 in Tanya. In the lessons of Tanya, he was saying that the whole purpose of this acquiring this love is so that it gets infiltrated in the way we serve Hashem. So here the Alter Rebbe actually talks about all these different types of love: Ahavat Olam, Ahavat Rabbah, and then finally Ahava B'Tanugim. And the Ahava B'Tanugim is like a type of love that is delightful, somewhat to the experience, of course in a very diluted way, of the love that we're going to experience in Olam Haba. And that's a reward. And that's wonderful. But again, it's not the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is to be able to use that love to help us serve Hashem better. So when it says in the Shema, and we say it every day, we have this contemplation that with all of my heart is that my heart will be filled with love of Hashem, not anger, not jealousy, not worrying or whatever. And then 2, to get it to that stage with all of your soul, so that all of the life of you, every part of your organ, begins to be infused with this love. And thirdly, bechol meodecha, which is to allow this to so fill you up that no inch of you is separated from Hashem, so that so much so you would be willing to sacrifice your life for Him. Whether it's mamish misrus nefesh, when, God forbid someone says, do something and it's one of those 3 things that you're not supposed to, that you'd be mamish willing to give up your life for God, because that's what He wants. Or in a day-to-day way where things are difficult, finances, but you still give the tzedakah, or that you're willing to give even of your life, the life here on this earth, meaning not focus on worrying about even so much your physical being, that you're ready and willing to sacrifice of even your physical comfort to be able to do the mitzvah of hachnasat orchim, or do the mitzvah of tzedakah in any which way. So the Alter Rebbe actually continues that the kind of love that the divine soul desires is that the heart be inlaid with love from within. So that not that the love kind of is on the surface of the heart, but that the heart would be full. Mamish occupying the entire space, so much so that it begins to overflow into the left part of the heart. So that's where the animal soul is, so that the emotional faculties of the animal soul will then become transformed. I always like to give the image of this goblet with this putrid wine, and then the more you fill in this amazing good wine, eventually the putrid wine just spills out on its course. So again, you don't have to battle the anger and battle the this and get dirty and emotional. You just have so much love that it just begins to flow into the animal soul, and with due course, it just kind of vanishes on its own. And he says specifically when this light and this love actually begins to overflow, because the heart is so filled with this love, that the element of water in the animal soul begins to be crushed. And the water, remember, is the element of lusting. So because you have such a great desire for Hashem, and you're yearning and longing to do more mitzvahs, more behidur, that so much of that water element in the negative side is crushed, and it's overtaken by the positive, holy water element of the godly soul. And he says that this, that we, simple people have this power. Not only the tzaddikim can really transform this, everyone. And so that the transformation goes from lust for mundane to love of God. As it says in Devarim, you shall love your God with all of your heart. Meaning, if you look at the way it's written, it's levavecha and not levacha. Meaning, two of your hearts, because that's a plural way of saying heart. Because if it was singular, it would be levacha, your heart. But it's all of your hearts, meaning your animal soul and your godly soul together will be serving Hashem. And that we say this every day in Shema. So we're not saying this for no reason. We really can achieve and attain this high level of serving Hashem. And he continues, and he says, when we have this delight in the level of the water, and then he adds seed, because this is what's happening. As the water element in the godly soul grows, it then plants its seeds in the animal soul. And then this holiness of the divine soul gets planted in this animal soul. And then the good of the water will transform this negative attribute of the animal soul and the physical pleasure it had previously had. So we understand that the Zohar says that the evil of the animal soul is transformed and becomes perfectly good like the good inclination when it is stripped of its unclean garments, meaning the mundane pleasures that it had been connected to. So remember, the Yetzer Hara, the Alter Rebbe explains, is a neutral drive, and it may be steered in any direction. Now, this might be like new to you. So that if we just allow the body to take its course, then it's going to go toward physical pleasures. So, and then these unclean garments get, attached to ours, and then the animal soul's drive gets stronger. But by steering it away from physical pleasures and toward an appreciation of spiritual pleasures, then the divine soul strips the Yetzer Hara of its unclean garments. And then it could be steered in the right direction. And then the powerful appetite for pleasures to Hashem continues to grow. Then what happens is that what is created by this is a fear and love of Hashem so powerful that it actually transforms the animal soul to good. Now, remember, Tanya is not for the tzaddikim. This is for all of us. And Alter Rebbe is explaining to us that this is how we transform this animal soul. And we will arrive. Yagati umatzati ta'amin. And then he continues and he says that the other emotions in the heart, which are really the offshoots of fear and love, will then eventually also be dedicated solely to Hashem. So up till now, we were talking about the mind and the heart, And now the Alter Rebbe is going to continue in talking about the other organs of the body, so that eventually that these positive emotions that are now being developed will infiltrate our faculty of speech in our mouth. And the thought that is in our mind will be so filled with the divine soul's garments that the person will be able to really have more power to restrain the words that are not holy or not productive or types of words that are vain. I remember the Rebbe actually, when confronted by so many different organizations, said, look at all these different organizations, Lashon Hara campaign, and, I don't see this at the Chabad campaign. There's lighting candles, there's this, there's that. So the Rebbe said, we don't need that kind of a campaign. And he gave an example and why we don't need it. He said, look, when you have a virus, you might take Tylenol, right, and it'll alleviate the symptoms, but that's not really curing the ailment. You really need something very strong to eradicate that virus from your body. And so, too, we, have the Chabad philosophy of Avas Yisrael. And we have a campaign of Avas Yisrael. So the more you cure the ailment from its source, meaning the lack of Avas Yisrael is why we're speaking not nicely to someone. But when we work at increasing our Avas Yisrael through our Avas Hashem, because the more we love God, we more love what is beloved to Him. So then there's no real point in taking that Tylenol and, combating that Lashon Hara, which was so nicely put by the Rebbe. So then he continues and he says that the mouth will never cease from studies, so that eventually the faculty of action, which is vested in the hands and the rest of all the organs, will then be so moved to serve Hashem in the utmost way. And the Alter Rebbe actually gives the parable that is explaining this whole process of understanding this Yetzer Hara and animal soul. Because one might think, and many do, it's so wicked, it's this or that, God forbid. No. He gives a mashal that, when this king who wants to make sure that when he gives over his kingship to his son, that he is of worthy caliber. So he sets him up with a test, hires this woman and says, look, I know this is going to be difficult for you, but I know you want to serve me in the best way possible, but I'm really asking you this favor. Go to my son, act like a prostitute, tempt him, and I want to see try your best to tempt him. So this woman doesn't want to act this way, but she realizes it's going to help the future kingdom, by doing what the king wants her to do, and she does. So he gives the example that, this is the Yetzer Hara. And any point in time where the Yetzer Hara is constantly kind of trying to fulfill its mission, and if not, it would be disobedient, and it would be, really failing in its mission. Because basically, the inward desire of this Yetzer Hara, just like this inner desire of this, so-called woman who's going to act like a, prostitute, God forbid, but the inner desire is that the prince should not succumb to the test, and through this test, when he does control himself and not succumb to the test, his inner power is revealed. And then the king is reassured that, I can now be rest assured to give over the kingship in that sense to my, future son. And all this is for man's benefit. Which reminds me of a story that I was reading to my children about Reb Baruch, which was the father of the Alter Rebbe. At one point, the whole congregation was waiting for him to start the services, and he was missing, and everyone pretty much knew if he was missing, he was on some kind of holy mission. And so here he is, and on his way to go to shul, he hears a whimpering sound. So he follows the sound, and he comes to a hut, and he sees that this old woman is by herself and can't feed herself, and he hears her sighing. And he just really realizes he really has to do something about it, so he starts putting boiling water and starts to feed him. And he realizes everything is for a reason. He has to learn something from this. And as he was recalling it to his disciples and his Hasidim, he said, when I first heard her sighing, it just reminded me of Galus. And the crying, the pain, and the suffering, and I just really started getting despondent and started feeling lowly. But then, as I was boiling the water, I don't know, the boiling water reminded me of hope, the bubbling of the hope of the future of how it's going to be, and he then and there realized that he was really going to make a commitment not to let the sighing get him down. That really more to focus on the bubbling water of the future, of what's around the corner, what's really good, and to keep his simcha through not letting the voices of the sighing distract him from his purpose of being besimcha and serving Hashem. So the same thing, we might be sighing and this and that and everything, it's difficult, we want to be better, we want not to be so, stressed out when we're dealing with people, we don't want to fall, we want to always be 100% perfect, but as we're engaged in this holy work, the more we focus on the bubbling water of what just around the corner is going to be happening to us through this process of learning and especially studying Tanya, that we got to keep our spirits high. Reb Baruch was so amazing that one time actually someone came to him and said, look at you're in a high position, you have wealth, everything. No, it's very easy to be so good in such a position. Who knows who you would really be if you weren't put in this position? So he started questioning himself, really, well, maybe he has a point, I don't know. So right away he packs up his bags, as those tzaddikim used to do, and just kind of test himself. And he goes through a wandering to figure out, is he really a good person? Can he still be a good person without all this attention and this position? So he goes unknown, he becomes a farmer, and lo and behold, after a while, everybody's in love with him. He still continues to be kind, has kind, loving words to people, reassures them, teaches them, and he really finds out, I guess it's really, I am who I have been. And the truth came out, and then he left and he came back to his community feeling rest assured. And many times, that's the trick of the Yetzer Hara, trying to make us think who are we really? I remember one time at my Shabbos table, some woman was saying this idea when it's good to see a variety of levels of observance, that God forbid, when there hasn't been, it's hard for me to say this, but I don't know, she just sensed that, the true colors of everybody comes shining forth as they honestly just serve Hashem at whatever level they are at. And at least when you meet someone, they're honest with themselves. And I was just trying to think about that, and she was just trying to explain that's their true, sense. They're not, putting on a great or big hat or wearing, more tznius clothes because everybody else is doing it. And I'm like, hello, no. I mean, if you learn Tanya talks about the fact that the true core is an nefesh elokis, and she wants perfection. She wants to serve Hashem in the most lofty way. It's the other way around. It's the non-true self that is apparent when the person is not serving Hashem at its best. Which reminds me also, the Rabbi Kaczynski gave this story, just this Simchas Torah, and he was talking about how this businessman, when he would go on a business trip, he would just put on normal business clothes, but when he went to the Rebbe, he would, wear his kapato and the shtreimel and whatever, but after a while, he's just like, what am I doing, fooling myself? Let me just go in my regular business clothes to the Rebbe. And he just said, I'm going to be honest, why should I fool the Rebbe? And so when he approached the Rebbe with his business clothes, the Rebbe said, you got it the opposite way around. Your true inner self is the one who wants to dress like this and be, mehuder in connecting to Hashem and not being shameful of your religion. Who are you fooling? When you put on that business suit and you go out to the businessmen, you're trying to fool the business world, but that's not who you really are. So the same thing regarding every aspect of our being, and our goal is to be more of who we really are. And this happens through our learning, through our connection to developing this mastery over this animal soul. And once again, not just master it, like, okay, put you out there, I'm going to control you, and then end up getting sick over it, but mamish, transforming it. So there's no even negative emotion to actually control. So this is the goal. Just to do that through our learning. And it's so many women I confront all over different places when I go lecture. And they just like, I'm busy, I have this, I have that. Who has time to learn? Oh my gosh. It is hard. It's juggling the food, the shopping, the children, the clothing. My goodness, just even dealing with the clothing as they outgrow the clothes is like really a chore, and keeping up with it. But there's ways to look at your life, look at where you're spending too much time on stuff that's not getting you anywhere and actually to your detriment, and really invest in your life that 10 minutes a day, half an hour a day, or whatever, learning to be able to reach such riches that will affect your whole family. Because as you begin to be the role model for them, they have what to emulate. And that's more important than anything in the whole wide world. Even if you don't care about yourself and Gan Eden and getting there and feeling this love of Hashem, it's like it doesn't have any desire within you at the moment. But for your children's sake, for your husband's sake, for the world's sake, to be at your best through learning, it's gewaltig. Rabbi Manis Friedman actually brought a story of this man who was just so pashut and didn't care about his ego. People hurt his feelings, this, that, always saying kind words, always really in control of his midas. And all of a sudden, they for months was seeing how amazing this man is in control. So he all of a sudden starts to raise his voice and reprimand them when they had asked the parents to do something kind of in a chutzpahdik way. And he was like, whoa, where did this come from? He's so cool and collective, but here, whoa, what's going on here? And Menace Friedman was giving the point of, like, when it has to do with your own ego or whatever, like, pass it over, don't, Akol Mishamayim, you have to experience it. When it's somebody else's ego and it's being affected in a negative way, then you really do have to do something about it and make your point. As Alter Rebbe says, Moshe Rabbeinu, and it's in the upcoming Tanyas of the day, used anger in a positive way to get the Jewish people to stop from transgressing. So here we are, and the biggest impact in the child is not just preaching and telling and cajoling and praying to Hashem, oh, please, 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 let my child have a better neshama, let the chinuch come easier, let him, a miracle happen, and then just sink in his head finally. But mamish, more by your example, more by praying for your own soul, more by taking the time to learn. That will have a greater impact on the child, as he has who to emulate. Anyway, without further ado, let's just have that in mind and continue. Baruch Hashem, I bless everyone with more time to spend on your studies and more time to engage in this transformation. And this happens through our studies. B'ezrat Hashem. So now we're going to do a meditation. And we were running a little late, so I hope we have a little time before my children walk in the door to do the discussion. I'm going to put the music on. And in the meantime, I also want to just say that, as usual, I ask for a kavana to have in mind a tzedakah that will be given, and the tzedakah can be written out to SANE, and this is a nonprofit organization that, Baruch Hashem, many good things are coming from the money sent. Monies to the soup kitchen in Israel and production of more CDs. Whoever's interested in ordering also, you can contact me at 718-735-7086. Funds for, God willing, children needing, learning and to go to yeshiva, B'ezrat Hashem. And my address is 640 Eastern Parkway, Unit 4C. And if you want to write specifically what the money you want used for, you can write it on the check or with a note. Oh, okay, my address, Brooklyn, New York, 11213. As I like to say, 4C is my apartment. 4C, the future of everything good. B'ezrat Hashem. So now put yourself in a comfortable position and begin to feel more and more relaxed. Take a deep breath, and with every breath you take, feel a wave of relaxation. Bringing in all that is good, peace, tranquility, happiness. Really sense a gratitude to Hashem that we have the Hasidic teachings to really help us understand ourselves and understand the process of bettering ourselves. Feel the greatness of Hashem for this gift of time to really develop into that most amazing spiritual being. let's do some exercises to help our body relax even more. And we're going to tighten our fists and a count of 3. 1, 2, 3. And slowly feel the difference. Letting go of all that was and really feeling the freedom of being relaxed, calm. Now focus on your toe muscles. Curl them up. And a count of 3, just let go. Take the time. Give yourself the gift to replenish and rejuvenate after all this time of holiness that we were just gifted with and all the holidays. We're going to just now see a beautiful white cloud, and it's going to take us to a most beautiful place to help us become even more relaxed. You witness the journey unfolding before you, the beautiful world that Hashem created in this most beautiful place that you have journeyed to. And you really tap into this amazing awareness of the greatness of Hashem, into Ahavat Olam, the beauty, the colors, even the birds singing in the background, just stirs within you this sense of peace, sensing the beauty of Hashem and His majesty. And you forever feel more and more grateful. Looking at all now the good in your life. Appreciating the big miracles that seemingly are happening every day before us. The fact that we could see, hear, be alive, witnessing all the good that's in the world. And you sense now, after having used your brain and developing Chokhmah, Bina, and Das through your learning, you have a better capability of really focusing your attention on the Yirat Hashem, the awe that is mastered through your intellect, developing greater and greater awareness of just everything that is good. It's amazing. You begin to now sense that through your love and appreciation for Hashem, the Yira begins to develop, healthy Yira. Mamish, reprogramming your brain with healthy thoughts of love and of Hashem. You then begin to really develop the pachad, the healthy pachad, a dread of not wanting to be separated from Hashem, wanting to completely please Hashem with this most amazing love, there, ready to motivate all organs of your body. You sense that this love is now moving from an intellectual stance down towards your emotional stance. Having it spill over into the left side of your being, the animal soul. It's not evil. It just wants to be steered in the right direction. And this love begins to overflow and really change the garments of this animal soul. Spilling over and now beginning to penetrate the seeds of Ava and Yira being planted in this side of your existence. And it's just no room for anything but goodness. And you begin to sense everything that's good. Even this process is good. Because you will be achieving the goal with your own efforts, not a free gift from Hashem. And you sense and you see yourself now with this transformation. You visualize yourself now with this transformation. It's amazing. You see yourself behaving in a dignified manner. You see yourself calm. You see yourself happy. No need to control anything anymore. It's just unbelievable. You feel strong. And this brings you true joy. Seeing yourself in such a dignified manner. It's amazing. You have the vision. And it's there. And it's always there. Now you're beginning to reveal it. It'll be more easily felt and sensed. And actually now the cloud kind of approaches you, helping you bring this vision down into reality. You hold on to this vision. You take it with you. It is you, waiting and ready. You begin to feel that the love that you just accumulated and developed and revealed is now going to penetrate every organ of your body. You feel your hands ready and willing to be more giving, free of any calculations. Your feet touching the ground, moving you toward righteousness, taking you toward the path of success in your mission. And you're smiling because you feel reassured that it's a process and you're getting there. You're making the moves. You're taking the time. You're going to succeed. You are succeeding. And your eyes shining with a new ray of hope a greater awareness now, because you're one step closer to your ultimate geula. And when you're ready, open your eyes to a brand new, better you. And whoever is ready out there, I just want to leave a message. I was at the Great Neck, and the rabbi gave one of the congregants an opportunity to share with his experience of the Simchat Torah. And as he was saying, he was trying to really work hard at being besimcha, for the holiday, and he just kept trying, it just wasn't coming to him as much as he wanted to, because different situations in the family and the struggling, and it was unbelievable. But as he was trying to figure out how to be besimcha, he realized, as he's been looking into the past of how he used to be, yes, he has much more work to get that much closer to that perfection, but that when he noticed the difference of the previous, just even the last previous year, compared to who he is and how he behaves now, he really then sensed his own simcha. As the Gemara says, who is a happy man? He who's able to really have that self-mastery and see that he has the ability to say what he wants to say when and when not to say it. And just by looking in the past year and seeing where we used to be and where, Baruch Hashem, we are now, can help us keep the simcha of Simchas Torah with us and continue to just be hopeful of what the upcoming year will be and how we will change in the next coming year as well. So without further ado, I will remind everyone to keep shining by smiling. Take it one day at a time, and hopefully next week we will not have the technical difficulties. It will have a little more time left for the discussion at the end of the class. With blessings to you all, and looking forward to receiving those checks in the mail so we all can do a lot of good. Please don't forget, I know a lot of people listen to this, Baruch Hashem. They stop me on the big streets and they say, oh yeah, and I just would like to see a little bit more thanks by sending those checks. Doesn't have to be much. Okay, all the kids are coming home. Bye. What a happy entrance. Bye.